Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining another episode of Sound Bites. This time around, our guest is Scott Tinkoff. He's Senior VP of Strategy at Anteriad, a full funnel marketing solutions provider, and a great person and a good friend. So, Scott, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm
All
really
right.
excited to chat with you guys.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. I know we chat on email back and forth, and we have some good work conversations. But it's good to, first of all, learn a little bit about where you came from. I know that we've chatted for quite a bit, but I always learn something new, no matter who I chat with. So why don't you start with where you came from and how you got here?
So I'm somewhat of an accidental marketer, I guess, in a lot of ways, as many folks are, I think. I went to school because they were going to let me play baseball, and they had 5 different majors I could choose from that I thought were in my wheelhouse.
What were some other
fell
ones?
into marketing, psychology, which I have a minor and feel like sometimes I just play camp counselor all week. That's really my job now. And architecture, engineering. So I really didn't know what I wanted to be. I actually wound up with an internship my junior year at Uline, where I started my career after college, and learned the ins and outs of direct marketing and really catalog marketing at that point. Spent a few years there, moved up to Wisconsin and worked at School Specialty, and spent a few years north of the border, and came back home to Chicago 13 years ago and joined Anteriad, and have been here ever since. So worked on the client side, now on the vendor side, and try to bring a little bit of both ends to that whole game, in the same way that you both do.
Yeah, it's interesting. We both started on the client side and then, kind of came back around to the agency. So, you started off in college and you're like, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, kind of fell into marketing. What about, why did you land on that? What about that interested you to the point where it was like, this is where I kind of want to be?
It gave me a lot of the things that I was looking for. If you look at a lot of the different options that I was considering at that point, I wanted something where I worked closely with people. I wanted something where there was an opportunity to use math and analytics maybe in some way, because that's probably my comfort zone. Wanted something where there was a bit of creativity, and that it was a lot of problem solving. And at Uline, I was really fortunate, even as an intern. Most of us know Uline today as a multi-billion-dollar behemoth that there's a truck passing you on the highway every 6 seconds, or a catalog at your door every day. Much smaller company back then, a couple hundred employees. Things were very different, and so got to wear a lot of different hats, see a lot of different things. And so as I was making my decision about what I really wanted to do, all of a sudden I almost had a path. And it's funny in talking to you all and thinking about data and what was the data that got me interested, and how did that fit in. I remember very little from college, but one thing I certainly remember was my senior year walking into one of the marketing classes, and the professor talking about SICs and who knew what those were and how they worked. And I knew all about them because I worked at Uline. And all of a sudden I was like, I know something about this and I feel like I belong. And so it just gave me a lot of opportunity to do a lot of the things that interested me.
And it isn't interesting, like the time frame that you were at Uline, right? Like, it growing on the back as Amazon exploded, it probably was exponential growth for the years that you were there as you were getting ready to transition into your next role. What was the biggest thing you saw change in your time period that you were there?
Everything, to be honest, and also nothing at the same point in time. Sounds silly, but there's a lot of truth to it, from the standpoint of Uline and what they do. One of the things that's made Uline terribly successful over the years, and one of the things that I try to remember in my day-to-day job, my life, and everything else, is their commitment to excellence and consistency. And so as they continued to grow, they continued to focus on customer service and making sure you talk to a person and making sure they picked up the phone faster than the emergency lines because they wanted you to get to a person right away and have a really good experience and come back and buy again. They have still stuck with the catalog in a big way when other people have continued direct mail, but pivoted to other channels more significantly. Uline really still is a catalog business first. So in that way, they were immensely consistent. In the other end, the growth was rapid, year over year, double-digit growth. The number of new people, the number of the changing landscape in business in general. And to your point, Derek, they hit it in all the right ways. Unbeknownst to Liz Uline, when she started it in 1980 in her garage with a box sizer, she had no idea that packaging supplies were going to be the next big thing. But you talk about a business that was right time, right place. Holy cow, packing supplies, and COVID certainly didn't slow that down.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there are a lot of brands where they're not loyal to any type of marketing channel or medium. You know, they're going to follow where the attention is, and it sounds like Uline is still, you know, innovating in its own way, but very consistent and very focused on maybe the things that got them there, and that's probably why they're still leveraging a direct mail catalog, while they're still a catalog business. You know, how are they maybe innovating, and how are maybe folks who are also focused on direct mail innovating in that space? Because I think there's this assumption that direct mail is, you know, I don't want to say it's not innovative, but it's just sort of like the old way of doing things. It's more traditional marketing. So how are you guys applying like innovation to something that's maybe perceived as traditional?
Yeah, I think, you know, in my day-to-day and at Anteriad, we were founded 23 years ago for B2B marketers, and we were almost entirely catalog focused. Now it's a very small part of a much bigger enterprise. And so, yeah, catalog's still part of my day-to-day or my team's day-to-day, but it's not a huge piece. For someone like Uline, it's still a really big piece. And the advantage that they have is scale and size. Postal is expensive. And frankly, more than anything, if we look at performance writ large, the ways that people interact with catalogs, the amount that people respond from a catalog mailing, the way that direct mail in general is treated and you know, gets handled by the consumer or the end user really hasn't changed that much. And some of that is that it still has that thud factor. It's a disruptor. We get all these digital messages, thousands of them a second, if we're online, and we're not paying attention to all these things that are going on around us. That catalog slammed in your mailbox certainly gets your attention. And now there's fewer and fewer of them. So they have some real impact. And I think the biggest piece that's challenging people, and we were just at ANA and at Forrester, and you hear the same thing, that there's this kind of renaissance of direct mail because it has that impact. But it's expensive. And so digital channels being able to get in front of a lot more eyeballs at a much lower cost is sexy and interesting. Using direct mail to do the same things you've always done and have that thud factor be in front of people is important, but being able to mix what you're doing. So using lower cost vehicles, being able to customize and really create some more experiential pieces, being able to talk to people and use the long form of the catalog to get a lot more message in front of people. That's really been successful for the folks that continue to invest there.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about this element before, but when someone chooses just all digital, they're really missing out a lot, right? They're missing a lot of opportunity. And one example of that is there's a shoe company who I see ads for every now and again, and I was interested in it. But then I got a paper mailer from them too, and then I ended up converting, right? And it was just interesting seeing all the different touches of the funnel, how they all work together as an omni-channel marketing strategy, and how that can really drive conversion for your target audience way more than beat them over the face on Instagram repeatedly. Have you seen that, especially as you've transitioned into Anteriad and you're growing in your positions there?
Yeah, because when we started, it was you have all these catalog marketers. help them do other things, help move them along kind of that path and help take their customers down the funnel. And so we started introducing additional things, additional services, additional marketing techniques, channels, and otherwise to help do that. That worked really well for those marketers, but it was very difficult to get adoption right away. That was the initial challenge was, hey, there's all this digital stuff out there. Catalog's getting more expensive. Let's try some other things. And over time, we flipped our model. We weren't talking about the channel and then the audience. We were talking about the audience and then the channel. And really, that's where we're at today, right? We build an audience, then we drive the channel. Because of that, our business is almost flipped on its head. And now when we talk to new folks, some are direct mail forward or have a direct mail program. Most of them aren't leading with direct mail. And most of the folks that we talk to are not really focused on direct mail with us. They're focused on all the other things that we can do. And oftentimes they're coming to us because, hey, we started this e-commerce business. It's done really well. Google's been great, but we're beholden to Google. They control the universe, and we don't love that. And our clicks are getting more expensive, and we're also seeing diminishing returns. We keep throwing more money at it. We keep getting more sales, but the return's going down, 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 down. And all of a sudden, we're not so sure this is the right place to be. And we dig into the data and we say, hey, look, you're a B2B company and you have all these consumers buying from you because of Google. And these guys are never going to come back and they're low return. You're breaking even at best. We need to pivot. And so for those folks, things like direct mail become a real interesting piece of the puzzle and can help get you that, oh, wow, because a lot of what we're trying to work with folks to do, and it's easier today than it's ever been, is make your company look big. Because I think that's one of the challenges we have right now, especially in the consumer side of the world, is there's umpteen jillion. We were just talking before we jumped on here about men's clothing brands. There's 100 different places to get a black t-shirt. Good choice, Derek. We look good. Well, you do. I'm not.
Likewise. Yeah, likewise.
But
you're pulling off the crew neck, just crushing it.
You know, I like the V usually, but we'll see. I wanted to differentiate myself from you a little bit.
Exactly. We don't want to look the same, right?
Feeling very excluded right now. It's fine. Just
sorry, Lauren.
It's fine. No problem.
But all those brands, how do they differentiate themselves? And we as consumers start to recognize, is that a real company, or is that just like somebody who's selling a few t-shirts, or are they just rebranding something else, or is this quality stuff? And to your point about the shoe company, you get that direct mail piece. You've seen all that online ad. Now it's like, oh, they're big. And the inverse is true too. I've been getting these direct mail pieces and, oh, wow, look, that company is following me everywhere with programmatic display. And now I'm getting some emails from them and I'm seeing their ads in Google. Oh man, they must be a pretty big company. That must be reputable. I want to give them a try. So I think that's a lot of the game. That's where the world has migrated us.
I was going to say, it's really interesting. I think over the last 10 years, especially like on the consumer side, it was very PPC driven, digital ads, paid social, put all of your money into that to the exclusion of some more traditional forms of media. And then just like you're seeing on the B2B side, it's like, okay, we are attracting some customers, not the right customers. We're spending a ton of money and our returns are not as big as they once were. And so you're seeing brands like Airbnb who are saying no more digital advertising. We're going to be doing some earned media. We're going to be doing like a PR blitz and then doing some more traditional media. And they're seeing huge returns on their investment and their numbers are way stronger. And so I think there's like a pendulum that sort of swung one way. And now I think people are looking at, other types of media to get their message across, but not to say that there can be a huge impact when you have digital and more traditional forms of media mixed together, especially on the B2B side. And I know that's primarily who Anteriad works with. So I'm curious what sort of unique marketing challenges B2B folks have right now. Is there anything you're sort of seeing from a trend perspective that are, unique challenges to B2B marketers?
I think there are a number. But everything that's old is new again, right? There are very few truly new challenges. they just present themselves in slightly different ways. And you talk about that pendulum, whether it's online and offline, whether it's addressable media versus non-addressable media, like linear TV versus a catalog years ago. That pendulum always seems to swing back and forth. And I'm going totally off topic. I'm not going to answer your question, but I'll come back to it, I promise.
Classic PR train. Go ahead.
Acknowledge, re-message, right?
I was just reading an article about Moneyball turning 20. And I love how other things can fit into marketing, fit into business. I love seeing those things come together. Sports being an easy one, and baseball being one that I think works better than almost anything else to align with what we do, because there's so much analytics, because there's so much data, because there's so much history. And the article was really about the whole concept that Moneyball happened. Everybody kind of saw this, read the book, thought about it, and said, shoot, I got to build my analytics team. I've got to get more analytical. And everybody fired all their scouts, and the pendulum swung all the way. And now people are going, yeah, we're always going to be really analytics forward, but there's something to the human eye, and we can't just rely on video and bat speed and all these random, things. We need to actually talk to the folks. We need to understand if this guy's really committed to the game, blah, blah, blah. And I think the same thing happens in marketing. We swing these pendulums too far. We say, oh, you know what? No more digital marketing. We're done with that. We're going back to traditional stuff. Okay. But the truth is the success is always kind of in the middle. And so getting back all the way to your actual question, which was, what are we seeing as far as challenges? There are those challenges about trying to understand the middle. So I always say there's two A words in B2B marketing. One is attribution and the other one is Amazon. They're four-letter words to most of the folks that we work with, because as soon as they get brought up in a meeting, everybody cringes and backs away. But how do we handle those two things? What's the best way to manage our product? Do we work with Amazon or against them? Attribution, do we try to split the baby and come up with this perfect attribution model? I say absolutely not, because in the time and the money and all the effort that you're going to put into it, you're going to get an imprecise answer anyway. And what are you going to really impact? And I think we see those things. We see the ability to use good data, and this is business or consumer as well. It used to be a little bit easier, but people always had data challenges with, I'm getting all these orders and I need to rationalize my customers. Now we're trying to rationalize online and offline orders. We're trying to rationalize people who are, where they are online and resolve digitally to people. We're trying to understand and bring all that data together in one way that we can understand it and make sense of it. And so it's all the same challenges that we've always had. We're just dealing with them maybe at a faster pace and with a greater number of variables and pain points.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the attribution point is always front of mind for us. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk to you about that. And I think attribution was interesting because that helped fuel why people saw a lot of attractive elements to digital marketing. Well, one, there was attention there, right? First and foremost. But then you could cleanly attribute how that attention drove your funnel, right? You could track it, trace it. It was really, really great. But then to the point, it comes down to like, well, how does all your offline stuff tie into that? What are the best ways to say this contributed X to result Y? And, Lauren and I talk about that a lot. And she introduced me to holdout testing. She's like, well, you stop doing it. You stop doing one thing and you wait and you look and see. That's one way. And then you have the ability now with, I know who I mailed something to. I know that person converted, so these kind of things can help you build a model that kind of helps toward attribution. But I feel like the attribution issue is always going to be kind of this combination of art and science together to make it work, right?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you just said. We fall in love with the attribution models that are out there. We just have to remind ourselves that those are great directionally. And I'm actually a fan of all of the data, just so long as you understand that none of it is gospel and all of it has its challenges. So directionally, this looks good. Are we winning year over year on search? Are we winning year over year on our digital funnel? That's great. Are we converting more of our leads? Are we getting better leads? We can get an idea of all these things, how they work together perfectly. A little more challenging. I love holdout testing. I'm a catalog guy from way back. That was the only game in town. You held out everything. So I think it's still, frankly, it's the most accurate way we have to get a picture of what the impact is. But really taking a more holistic approach, I think sometimes, and looking at the business, looking at all the different things that we're doing, understanding now we can start to draw out these audiences and understand these are the people who came from all the different channels. And frankly, in most of the channels where we're doing addressable things, we know who we're reaching out to. Even if that's display, we know who was in that display audience. So now we can start to say, hey, we have a pretty good idea of what we've invested in Scott Tinkoff. Is he buying and are we getting the return? And going to that more expansive view, it obscures some of the detail that we might want, but it gives us a really good understanding of, are we being successful or not?
Gosh, I think it's really interesting, and I'm maybe having flashbacks to meetings I've had with executives in the past where they love data too, because they tend to be analytical. And as we have more access to data, that has been great to get a sense for like directionally how are we doing. But I think for folks who maybe are not in marketing, it can be potentially, I don't know, weaponized or scrutinized in the wrong way. And I think as we're looking at budget challenges with a lot of brands, B2B, B2C, whoever, executives want a PowerPoint slide that says, show us the money that, this PPC campaign made and show us the ROI on this catalog. And then they're kind of cherry picking and saying, get rid of this, do this. We'll just like put all your money into this because it's making a bunch of money. And so it's, the weaponization of that data is really challenging. And so I do think there needs to be a lot of education, especially for folks in marketing, to be able to defend their plans and how to explain how to use attribution models to actually have a good marketing program. And then also on the executive side, to explain that you can't really do what you're trying to do with the data that you have. And I was wondering if is that a common story that you're seeing, or is this just my personal PTSD experience?
It's a tale as old as time. I've never met a great marketer, and I've met a lot, but I've never met a great marketer who's not a great storyteller. Because ultimately, all the data in the world can tell you whatever you want the data to tell you. It doesn't necessarily matter all that much. It's understanding the context, what data is important, and being able to separate the important from the flashing thing on the side, right? Really being able to bring out the things that are going to drive the business. And we get caught up, and executives have a tendency to go to the one red number on the page or see the one thing that's not working and call that out, the one big fat zero. And ultimately, we had this happen recently with a client. They said, well, we see no revenue attributing to this remarketing campaign you're doing. And we got called out on that in a meeting. So, well, what models were you using, and what were you looking at? How did you see no attribution, no attribution of revenue at all to that? And it turned out it was just physically impossible for any revenue to get attributed there because everything else came before that. And so it was just stealing revenue, right? It was going to the website and whatever else. But we didn't tell that story to the executives, and they said, well, this thing isn't working. We shouldn't be doing it. So now you had to reinvest the time to go back. And so it's really become even more of a challenge, I think, and more important on marketing leadership to be able to explain what they're doing, especially as this stuff gets more and more and more complex, in a holistic way. And that's where those siloed companies that have somebody doing display, somebody doing the website, somebody doing direct mail over here, they really wind up doing themselves a disservice because they're just creating a competitive environment that doesn't do what's best for the company.
Have you ever watched Arrested Development?
I have.
Yeah, so there's one episode I like to bring up every now and again, and it illustrates this pretty perfectly. One of the characters is going to open a second banana stand. They have a chocolate-covered banana stand, and he starts building it right across the sidewalk from the first one. And he's like, I've done the research. More frozen bananas get sold right on this corner than anywhere else on the boardwalk. And it's like, well, that's the only place you're selling bananas. So to the point, like, you can accidentally convince yourself anything and get the right answer to the wrong question with data if you're just interpreting it incorrectly, or you're not looking at it, to your point, holistically to see, all right, what part of this contributes to what goal? And if you're assigning the wrong goal to the wrong component of it, and then using data to prove that you're right, you're going to get a worse result, right? So can we talk about email for a second? So I think that's something that until I had talked with you, I undervalued significantly the value of email. I was like, I'm not really interested and concerned about it. But then talking to you, you're like, no, this is really effective. So how do you approach email strategy?
So I'm going to go back in the Wayback Machine again. But when I came to Anteriad 13 years ago, one of the first questions that I was asked was, you were at a company before this that had access to all the emails for educators. How are you using those for prospecting, and how effective were you, and what works? Because we have this big email asset and we want to make it go. And I just kind of laughed because we had never made it work. And Derek, to your point, I think I was in the same boat, and I've been in that boat a few times. And Lauren has actually helped prove me wrong on a couple. Social's a very good example of a place where I still try to deny the value of social in all marketing, but certainly in B2B marketing. And it has an impact. It can be really powerful. Email, though, what we kind of have figured out is that email, it's really about right-sizing it and using it in a way that builds a relationship, that tells a story, that helps people engage and understand your brand, because it kind of fits in the middle. You have something like a catalog or a sales call where you have this kind of long form dialogue. You can get your whole story out if you need to. You've got display or even TV or radio or other things. You've got an instant to tell somebody your story and they're out. And email is kind of the middle ground. It's a self-selecting audience. They got to open it, so you better do a good job with your subject line. But if you get people to open it, you can give them a little bit about your brand. You can vary your message. You can show them, you can add value to them beyond just what you're doing and what you're selling. I always use Huckberry as a great example. Going back to men's clothing and outdoorsy things, Huckberry is a great brand that does a really great job with their content. All of their emails are selling something. They're also telling you about all the things that would make you cool, all the things that I can't actually pull off, but like would love to. They do a great job telling me about all of them. And so that kind of value add, people can use email to really build and start to build a loyal cohort of people who may have never even engaged or purchased from you. Mm-hmm. But man, the next time they need something, the next time they need lighting or office supplies or a pair of boots, you're going to be, if not in the decision set, if not only in the decision set, the one they order from.
And back to your point earlier about someone saying, hey, this rebranding isn't driving revenue. People might look at those emails that are thought leadership pieces or that are tangential or just aren't selling anything in that email and be like, well, this didn't convert. It's like, well, its job was to build a loyal customer, to build trust. That's what that's the success criteria of that individual piece of communication. Not every piece of communication should be tied directly back to that dollar value. It should build into it eventually, right? I think people might miss that.
And that's the really hard thing to kind of make it a saleable proposition internally to a company, right? Like, so I'm going to invest this time and effort and some money to do something that may not get me an immediate return. And so that's where, you really need to flip the script and think about email not as I send an email, I get a response. And so many people, especially from the direct mail world, were trained. I send out a mail piece. I see a spike in order the day it comes in. I see a spike for the next few weeks, and then it goes off, and then I send another mail piece next month, and same cycle. So when I send emails, I'm going to see this huge blip. We'll drive more website traffic that day, but with all the other things you're doing to drive website traffic, is it a huge blip? Probably not, unless you're a pretty tiny company, but it's a big enough blip that we can find it. But what we see is that aggregate value, to your point, Derek, like of multiple touches over time, varying that message, selling occasionally, having something that, giving people an opportunity to buy something, but also giving them something that might be more meaningful to them. Hey, over time, the return on your ad spend is there and actually winds up being far greater than what you're getting in some other channels. And oftentimes you've pre-built a customer who is engaged and wants to buy from you. Whereas, even if you get the same cost to acquire as you got somebody off of Google, these guys are already pre-qualified to be long-term buyers, where somebody on Google is just as likely to never, reach out to you again.
I think it's also important to, I think email campaigns can be very successful if you actually pay attention to the customer journey and figure out where to plug them in throughout really effectively. We, at previous roles I've had, we would send a catalog, send an email, do some display, and time that around certain purchase behavior to hopefully make that email drive more revenue maybe than it should have. So I think there's some importance in paying attention to your customer journey, the sales cycle, when they're going to buy, and just plugging it in at the right time. And then also, to your point, setting expectations for every email. There are going to be some revenue driver emails that are intended to make money and should be having a stronger ROI than the brand building, awareness, higher funnel emails that you send to build that relationship, build that affinity and that awareness over time. So when they are ready to buy, you're top of mind and in their consideration set. So that's something that we worked on, you and I together, to figure out, like, hey, when are we actually going to see a higher return? How can we help spike that traffic and those orders? And that did tend to be around a catalog drop that we would send. So it's like reminding folks right before the catalog drop, and then a follow-up email. We saw that to be a really good sort of path and timeline for our marketing. And, I encourage marketers. I feel like a lot of marketers are just trying to do everything all at once and maybe don't focus enough on the customer journey, and try to be a little bit more mindful with their cadence. I don't know if you see that as well.
And test, right? You go back to the holdout test. Test these things, see what works, see what the timing is. But yeah, that's that holistic view too, is that you often have, especially at some of these larger companies, the other side of our business works really heavily in the tech space. And you have 5 teams at Dell going after very similar people that they're trying to target for cloud computing and software and product and hardware and all these different things. Being able to combine that, think about that in a logical way, and think about how you're talking to that person with your different channels. So you're always in front of them with display. You're timing your emails with your direct mail so that they have kind of an arc through each month and you can tell the story. Being able to vary the messaging in your emails, or timing things like social media ads or your sales and promotions along with all that. All those things become pretty, impactful. And that's really where success is made, is when all those things come together.
Bringing it right back, I guess, to the beginning of the conversation, you said, over this time, the one time period where you were at Uline, everything changed, and at the end of the day, almost nothing did. And that's basically a theme. And then you even spun it into marketers need to be great storytellers. And I think that's the thing that doesn't change. So what do you think the future looks like, now that I stole half the answer, of storytelling not changing, but what is the next 5-10 years of of marketing look like in your world? What are y'all working on and preparing for?
Full funnel gets thrown around a lot, and we throw it around here as well. But I really think it's the path to success. And that's been another theme I think we've talked about is really being able to integrate these things. Even 3 or 5 years ago, we were talking about multi-channel campaigns. Then it was omni-channel campaigns. Then it was integrated campaigns. Same thing, different words. But the reality was we weren't really good at tying these things out and being able to have that consistent audience across channel, being able to know that we were targeting Scott, even on the consumer side, consistently in all these different places and what impact that was having. We're never going to get to that perfect attribution model, but can we get closer? Can we better understand that? Can we better coordinate all of that? Yeah. And I think that's where the world is heading, is getting all those things brought together in a way that it makes sense, not removing the human element. Things like sales are still going to be important, but bringing marketing and sales even closer together. When I started 25 years ago, marketing and sales were very separate. Now they're coming much, much closer together in a lot of these things. Can we keep that? Can we keep that happening, and can we keep growing that with data? AI is going to continue to be a buzzword and probably a bigger part of what everyone does. But we got to realize a lot of the machine learning and the AI that we're talking about for our day-to-day marketing has been around for a long time. We called it modeling. We called
statistics.
Right. These things are going to be faster. Machines are going to do more of it. But as a colleague told me a while back, I was asking him, and he's in another agency, and was talking about his role and how he was mostly concerned because he's in charge of content. And man, ChatGPT is going to take my job. What am I going to do? And he said, no, I've been talking to people, and we just realized we don't have to worry about getting replaced. We just have to worry about knowing how to use the technology and being the best at using the technology, because they'll never replace us. And I think that's where marketing is going, being able to use all the tools in our toolbox effectively, keep people involved, and really just being able to continue to evolve with all of that on and offline.
I think that's a really great answer. And I think maybe you have the opportunity to rebrand omni-channel marketing as marketing channel interplay or something like that. That can be your next buzzword to be able to collect it all together. No, I agree with you. And I think looking at AI tools, instead of fearing that they're going to replace everybody, treating it more like a combine harvester. If you know how to use it effectively, you can farm really, really well, more than people that aren't using those kind of tools. I think it's a really solid answer. I like that a lot.
I have a question, because we started off the conversation with you with 5 major options. Really just wanted to go to college to play baseball, but became an accidental marketer. How do you think that decision? Gosh, I guess I'm trying to ask, are you happy with where you wound up? What advice would you give to maybe someone who's trying to figure it out? Marketing's in one of their 5 options as well. What advice would you give those guys?
I am happy with where I wound up. I've been certainly one of the lucky ones and been afforded a lot of opportunities and opportunities to just work with great people like you both as well. Not just blowing smoke, but it really does matter.
We'll take the flattery.
Yeah, take it where you get it. I don't get it enough. But really it is about people, and it's about what is important to you. And for me, marketing is always challenging. There's always the new problem and the whole idea of where the future is going. No one knows. The only thing we can be certain of is that it's going to look a lot like the past in the broad strokes, right? Nothing, the underlying themes are going to be there. It's just what's the new thing and how do I stay ahead of that? And that's where I look at this very differently than I might have 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. when you're starting out, you're just trying to learn and soak in as much as you can. Now you start to see the things that are, oh, wow, that's a theme, or that's a variation on a theme. And that's always consistent. And I think that's actually the part that becomes fun and exciting as you progress through your career, is being able to pick up those things and see them quicker, and being able to share those and have insight and actually feel like you know what you're talking about once in a while. Because most of the time you're guessing just like everybody else. But I find it enjoyable every day. And I think the human element of it ultimately is what makes it the best.
And we got to rebrand guessing into having a hypothesis. It's right. It's like, at least then
sounds more scientific.
Like, how did you come up with that? And it's like, I guessed. And like most of the time, that's what we're doing. It's like you have this, I wonder if this will work, and then you try it and test it and see where it lands.
I will say, Scott, like,
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Most of the biggest successes, and Lauren's been a part of a couple of them that we've had, and that I've had in my career, are the guesses that I think are bad, right? The ones where I'm like, oh man, I don't see this is going to work. But you go all in and you try to make it work, and then it does. So no one knows.
Yeah, I think that's why we've worked well together, is because we were both like, I don't know, why don't we try it? See, like, what's the worst that can happen? And we've had support on both of our sides to be able to take those chances. And I know a lot of marketers don't have that, but I think we were both really fortunate on our sides to be like, all right, let's take the chance and see where it goes. But I think you said something that was interesting, where it's like about the human element for you. It's about the people aspect and solving problems, and every day is sort of different. And that's what Derek and I say all the time, where it's like, we call ourselves problem solvers more than marketers, because we love working with brands to solve, especially small businesses who maybe don't have access to a marketing strategist to even bounce ideas off. They don't even know what's possible. And so I love being able to help those guys. And even on the B2B side, you work with a lot of brands where they're really focused on the ins and outs of their business, and don't think that there are a lot of marketing opportunities open to them. And I love that about you guys at Anteriad, is that you make those possible for those brands. So
yeah, you take those I wonder if questions, and then you take them forward. Whereas a lot of people would say, I wonder if X, and then abandon it. You're like, well, you got something here. Let's find out. We can figure that out, which is really great to see. It's good to see how you work through those problems. And then, related to the questions we just asked you, we'll get real specific with it. We got to the point where we saw that you're happy with where you are, and we walked through that path. But what advice would you give yourself if you could sit down, have dinner with 18-year-old you, 25-year-old you? You can sit down and have that chat. What do you say to that person?
Again, I've been really fortunate to have aligned myself and been given some opportunities with some really awesome people. And so some of them have given me advice that stuck with me. And I don't think I have a lot of wisdom to impart, but I can impart the wisdom that other people have shared with me. And most of those things have been kind of the drivers of a lot of what has wound up working out for me. The first one, and it really goes back to the whole people thing, is it's not about where you work, it's about who you work for. And surround yourself with the best people, and make sure that the person you're working for is somebody that you really trust and really appreciate their perspective. And I think, Lauren, to your point about being in environments where we had the opportunity to test, to do these things, to try things, it's really important as a marketer.
Yeah.
And finding that autonomy, most of that comes from your boss, the people who are around you, the culture of the company. So that's first and foremost. I just fell into a couple of good opportunities initially, but I wish I had known that ahead of time. I wish I had been willing to take a few more chances early in my career, personally and professionally in some ways. But I think, the people I know who have made the biggest impact like to remind me that you have to take those risks. Sometimes they are calculated, and sometimes we're guessing and we're probably wrong. And then we're so wrong, we wound up being right. You get afraid of that really quick, and it's really easy to steer clear of that. But a lot of times you got to do that. And the last is, as you start to do these things, believe in yourself a little bit, which sounds self-serving maybe, or like I really trust myself. No, but I think you, especially as a marketer, and especially when you have numbers and analytics and everything behind everything, we try to overthink things. Well, we don't. I do. I overthink everything.
I do. Me too.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
And you just don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah. It's probably a great piece of advice.
Yeah, I think all three of those are really good. I don't know about Derek, but I know from my experience, so many of my friends, when I took the job, an LED lighting company or semiconductor company, people are like, what? Like, that's weird. Why? What's that? That's not like a cool brand. But because I had such a great team, they empowered me to make so many crazy decisions and try so many things that I feel like I became a better marketer just by being there. And so it really isn't about who, like, the brand that you work for. And so many of my friends were trying to clout chase their for brand, like their brands, and to try to work to say that they work at these cool companies. But for me, it was like, but I get to do cool stuff that you'll never get to do at a company like that. And so I do think a lot of marketers are trying to chase the name and really not the opportunity of what they'll get to do at maybe a company that's not as cool. So I think that's really good advice for folks.
You'll see the resume be like Lehman Brothers, WeWork, Silicon Valley Bank, just following all the best on the way. That's the way they go through them.
Top of the top.
But that's a great point, though, even in marketing, right? Like if you look at aligning yourself with partners, aligning yourself with other companies and whatever else, right size yourself. The idea of always chasing the bright, shiny, or the biggest and best isn't always the best. And sometimes it's about fit. Sometimes it's about, hey, you're a $1 billion company. You have very different needs and affiliations and alignments than somebody who's a $20 or $40 million company. Lean into that. Don't try and be something that you think is cool.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice too. So I guess to really wrap it up, what are you listening to? Like, what books are you into right now? What podcasts are you listening to? What's on your playlist? What kind of media are you consuming on a regular basis these days?
My wife and almost 7-year-old will probably tell you I don't know how to read, which might also be what I say a lot. I can't listen to books on tape or on Audible as fast as Lauren does, because it's incredible the speed at which I got in her car once, and holy cow, I got nothing out of that except just static.
I tried to turn it down really quickly. I was ashamed.
Cow. No, it's
2.5x. Yeah.
Holy smokes. If I can get to 1.75, I'm winning here. But I do like, I like Audible, and I will read. I mentioned this earlier. I love the idea of books from other things that can impact our kind of business lives. And so, there are a couple of great books like Dichotomy of Leadership and Extreme Ownership, Navy SEALs type things. I still love Moneyball and Astro Ball, which is a play on that from recently for baseball. Some of the food books from Stanley Tucci and David Chang just wrote a book a year ago or so. I love how all of those different things can resonate with your personal life and resonate in your business life. And I think reading those types of things oftentimes is the most impactful for me. Just being able to take some of the things that people are doing in other industries and bring those back to what we do.
I like that a lot. I think you should at least listen to Rick Rubin's book about creativity, because he talks about that, like just observing and seeing things in different spaces and how you can apply it to a new place. And in the neural network world, we call that transfer learning. Like, how can you take something over here that doesn't exist in your realm, change the ending of it a little bit, and see if you get something interesting out? It's I think the best creativity and best outcomes come from those spaces where you're marrying things that might not belong together, kind of like balsamic vinegar and strawberries, right? It doesn't sound like they go together.
Oh,
They
bring
do.
it back to a cooking reference.
Well
Yeah,
done. Brought it to food.
try to
Yeah,
tie it together.
golly.
No, and I think that's a great point. I think even now having kids, right? We think about the way we were educated, and we think about the education system, and you learn these things and you learn to do them this way, and you learn these facts because they're important. And for years, we've all railed against that whole concept because how much of that do we actually use? Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of words and whatever else. But my wife's an engineer. She's the brains of the outfit. And she loves to say, like, I didn't learn to think. I wasn't taught to think growing up. And I had to learn that in college. And so we spend a lot of time with our kids trying to teach them to see those things, problem solve, and connect the dots on things that don't necessarily align. And I think, Derek, your point about being able to take something from a TV show or a book or food or how a kitchen runs and bring that back into your life and make those connections and say, ooh, what if we change that this way? That's the way great change, great new things are built. Because there are no new ideas. You want the other advice? There are no new ideas. Everything is derivative of something. And so our job is to just be able to see those connections.
Unearth it.
Quicker than others. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think that's a really great stopping point for all of us so we can end on that high note. I think this has been a lot of fun. I really loved hearing your story, how you selected your major, how that impacted your life moving forward, how your love of baseball has continued to impact how you think about marketing moving forward right now. Really, really interesting. I like what you had to say about your 18-year-old self, 25-year-old self. We love that section because we never get the same answer twice, which is continuing to hold true. So, Scott, thanks so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you both. That sounds great, guys. Thank you guys for having me.